The boardroom on the 31st floor of Hartwell and Associates went quiet the moment Renata Voss walked in. Not the polite quiet of people waiting for a meeting to start. The held breath kind, the kind that told you something was about to happen and nobody wanted to be the one standing in the wrong place when it did. Renata set her coffee on the table without looking at anyone. She was 41, sharp-featured, wore her dark hair, pulled back in a way that said she hadn't spent 20 minutes on it because she didn't have 20 minutes. She'd built Hartwell's Chicago division from a regional outpost into the company's highest-performing market in 4 years. She'd done it by being precise, demanding, and almost entirely humorless about deadlines. "The Meridian account," she said. "Someone walk me through it." Sandra Chen, her VP of Client Services, opened her laptop. "We're still waiting on the revised projections from. I know what we're waiting on. I'm asking why we're still waiting." The door opened. Every head in the room turned. A man stepped inside, slightly out of breath, wearing a canvas jacket over a Hartwell maintenance uniform. He had dark hair, a day's worth of stubble, and the look of someone who'd been moving fast and stopped suddenly. He scanned the room once, registered that he'd walked into something wrong, and his expression shifted into careful stillness. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought the space was available until 9. Renata looked at the clock on the wall, then at him. "It's 7 minutes past. I know. I apologize. I had a call I couldn't. Who are you?" It wasn't a question. "Joel Marsh, Building Systems. I was supposed to run a diagnostic on the HVAC before the morning meetings. I had it scheduled for 8. It's 9:07. Yes, ma'am. What's your supervisor's name?" Something moved across his face. Not fear. Something older than fear. "Ray Delaney. Sandra. Get me Ray Delaney's number after this." Renata looked at Joel with the particular calm of someone who had already made a decision and was simply completing the paperwork on it. "Mr. Marsh, I need you to understand something. This floor handles accounts worth $30 million. Every minute of delay costs this company money and costs my clients trust. When you schedule a job for 8 and walk in at 9, you're not just late. You're telling me that your time matters more than mine." Joel's jaw was set. He didn't argue. He didn't explain further. He just looked at her with those steady, dark eyes. "I understand," he said. "I don't think you do. Clear your access with security on your way out. HR will reach out about your final check." The room stayed very still. Someone coughed quietly. Joel picked up the bag he'd set down, nodded once, a single measured dip of his chin, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft final click. "The Meridian account," Renata said, as if nothing had happened. "Sandra." Nobody said a word about it. Nobody ever did. 4 floors below, in a maintenance corridor that smelled like concrete and machine oil, Joel sat on a bench and called his daughter. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad, hey bug, how are you feeling?" "Better. My throat still hurts, but Mrs. Patterson says I can come back tomorrow if I want." A pause. "Dad, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm fine. I'll be home by noon, okay? We can watch something." "What happened? Nothing that matters. I'll see you soon." He hung up and stared at the floor for a long moment. His bag sat beside him. Inside it, a thermos, a wrench set, and a folded piece of paper with a note from the nurse at his daughter's school that he'd been on the phone about when he'd finally made it to the 31st floor 7 minutes after the hour. He hadn't told Renata Voss that. He'd started to. Then he'd looked at her face, at the room full of executives watching him, and he understood that nothing he said was going to matter. She'd already decided what he was. A man who was late. A man who didn't respect other people's time. He'd spent 11 years in emergency medicine learning that some moments you couldn't talk your way out of. You just had to absorb the impact and keep moving. He left the building. The November air off Lake Michigan hit him like a door swung hard in his face. Renata spent the rest of the morning in back-to-back calls. By noon, she was back in her office, eating a salad she wouldn't taste, reading through the Meridian contract revisions with a red pen. Her assistant, Kevin, knocked. "Your sister called. Said it's not urgent. Tell her I'll call tonight." Kevin hesitated at the door. "Also, Marcus Webb from Operations wanted to flag something. Tell him I'm in the middle of the Meridian review. He said it's about the building services termination this morning." Renata looked up. "It's handled. He said the employee had a scheduling issue. His daughter's school called during." "Kevin." Her voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that meant stop. "I don't run this company by exception. If I start making exceptions, I have to make them for everyone. Schedule Marcus for tomorrow morning." Kevin nodded and left. Renata turned back to the contract. Read the same sentence 3 times. Set the pen down. She thought about Joel Marsh's face when she'd fired him, the way he'd looked at her at the end, not with resentment, not with the crumpling expression of someone who'd just lost their income. Just that flat, tired look. The way people looked when they'd already expected the worst, and the worst had arrived right on schedule. She picked up the pen again. She didn't have time for this. At 5:47 that evening, her phone rang. The number came up as Chicago Metropolitan Hospital, and the floor dropped out of her stomach before she even answered. Mrs. Voss, this is Dr. Patricia Cole. I'm calling about your daughter, Lily. Renata was already standing. What happened? Is she hurt? She's stable. She was brought in about an hour ago. There was an incident near the park on Weston. Someone attempted to take her from the pickup area. She's frightened, but physically she's going to be okay. But I do need you to come in. Renata didn't remember saying goodbye. She was already grabbing her coat. The ride to the hospital took 14 minutes. She spent them in the back of a car with her hands pressed flat against her thighs, eyes on the window, watching the city blur past. She thought about that morning. The last thing she'd said to Lily before the school bus came. She'd been on a call. She'd waved from the kitchen doorway, not even a real goodbye. Just a wave. The emergency bay was bright and loud and full of people having the worst day of their lives. Renata pushed through and gave her name at the desk and was walked back to a curtained area where her 8-year-old daughter was sitting up in a hospital bed with a bandage on her hand, looking small and pale and like she was trying very hard not to cry. Mom. Renata sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her daughter in and held on. Lily's arms went around her neck and she pressed her face into Renata's shoulder and finally in private let herself be scared. I've got you, Renata said. I've got you, I'm here. A police officer came in after a few minutes. Officer Deanna Park, calm and direct, with a notepad and the practiced gentleness of someone who did this often. She walked Renata through what they knew. Lily had been waiting at the pickup bench outside the park entrance on Weston Avenue. A man had approached her, said her mother had sent him because of a work emergency. Lily, remembering what she'd been taught, had said no and started backing away. He'd grabbed her arm. 3 people had intervened. A woman named Carol from a nearby cafe who'd come out when she heard Lily scream. A retired teacher named Bernard who'd been on his afternoon walk, and a man in a Hartwell maintenance jacket who'd been cutting through the park on his way home. The man in the Hartwell jacket had physically removed the attacker. There had been a brief, violent struggle. The attacker had fled. The man had stayed with Lily until the ambulance arrived, holding her hand, telling her she was brave, keeping her calm. What's his name? Renata asked. Officers Park checked her notes. Joel Marsh. The room went very still inside Renata's chest. He's down the hall, Park said. He was treated for a broken rib and some lacerations. He gave his statement and was waiting to hear about your daughter before he left. Renata looked at her daughter. Baby, I need to step out for just a minute, okay? Lily nodded against the pillow. The man who stayed with me, he told me knock-knock jokes while we waited for the ambulance. Like 100 of them. He said his daughter likes them but pretends she doesn't. Renata's throat tightened. I'll be right back. Room 12 was at the end of the corridor. The door was half open. She pushed it the rest of the way. Joel was sitting on the exam table, fully dressed, a piece of white tape over his eyebrow, and the careful stillness of someone trying not to move in a way that required his ribs to flex. He looked up when she came in. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. How is she? He asked. Scared. She'll be okay. Renata came further into the room, stopped a few feet away. You were there. I cut through Weston on my way to the La. You stayed with her. Of course. She looked at him. He looked back, steady and unhurried, the same way he'd looked in the boardroom that morning, except now his jacket had blood on it, and there was a bruise forming across the left side of his jaw. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't owe me anything. This morning I didn't give you a chance to explain. I should have. Joel was quiet. Why were you late? She asked. Really? He looked at the window. My daughter's school called. She woke up sick, but then her symptoms changed and the nurse wanted me to come in and decide whether she needed to be seen by a doctor. It took longer than I thought. By the time I got to your building, the meeting had started and he stopped. It doesn't change that I was late. It changes why. Does it? The question wasn't hostile, it was genuine. He turned back to look at her. Would it have changed anything this morning if I'd said that? Renata didn't answer right away. She thought about the boardroom, about the 30 faces watching her, about her own voice, certain and cold, about making examples of people so other people understood that she was serious. I want to think it would have, she said. That's an honest answer. I'm trying to be. She took a breath. I'd like to give you your job back. Better than your job. We have a facilities management position opening that. I appreciate that, he said it evenly, without cruelty. But I'm not looking for a favor. It's not a favor. You're good at your job and I fired you unfairly. I know. He stood up slowly, pressing one hand against his side. But I don't want to come back to a place because the boss feels guilty. That's not sustainable for either of us. She had nothing to say to that because he was right. Let me at least drive you home, she said. You have a broken rib. He looked like he was going to decline again. Then he sighed, just a small, pained exhale. Okay, they didn't talk much in the car. The city moved past the windows, all lit up, indifferent. Renata's driver took the highway north, and Joel sat with his head tipped back against the seat, eyes half closed, hands resting on his knees. Your daughter, Renata said after a while. What's her name? Ruby. She's 9? Is she? It's just the two of you? Her mom left when Ruby was 2. It's been us since. He said it without weight, the way people talked about facts they'd long since finished grieving. She's a good kid, annoying as hell sometimes. But good. Lily said you told her jokes until the ambulance came. Something moved across his face. Softer. Yeah. Ruby says my jokes are terrible. I figure they work better when kids are too scared to argue. Renata looked at her hands. Thank you. For being there. For staying. Anyone would have done the same. They didn't, though. Joel didn't have an answer for that. The car pulled up in front of a 2-story house in Irving Park. Not fancy. A covered porch with bikes leaning against it, a basketball in the yard, lights on in the front window. It looked lived in, the kind of house where someone was always making something in the kitchen. He reached for the door handle. Joel. He stopped. I was wrong this morning. About you. About how I handled it. She held his gaze. I'm saying that because it's true. Not because of tonight. He studied her face for a moment. I believe you, he said, but I think you've been running so fast for so long that you stopped noticing what you were running over. The words weren't angry. They were just accurate. He got out, walked carefully up the porch steps, and went inside without looking back. The lights in the front room moved. Someone crossing past the window. His daughter, probably, wondering why her dad was home and moving like something had hurt him. Renata sat in the car for another minute before she told her driver to go. She didn't sleep well that night. She sat in the chair by Lily's bed at the hospital until 2 in the morning, when Lily finally fell into a real heavy sleep and Renata let herself think. She thought about the last 4 years, the deals she'd made and the people she'd pushed past. She thought about Marcus trying to tell her about Joel's daughter that afternoon and how quickly she'd closed the door on it. She thought about the 30 faces in the boardroom, watching her fire a man who was late because his sick child's symptoms had changed. She thought about her own daughter, 8 years old, sitting at the pickup bench alone because Renata's schedule hadn't had room for a personal pickup. Around 3, she opened her phone and sent Marcus a text. I was wrong about Marsh. Can you meet me at 7? His response came faster than she expected, given the hour. Already pulled his file. See you then. The meeting with Marcus was the first honest conversation she'd had in months. He laid out what he'd found in Joel's HR record. Exemplary reviews, 0 complaints, one prior late arrival 2 months ago when a water main had broken on his block and flooded his street. His supervisor had noted, employee doesn't make excuses, work quality consistently above standard. He was a medic, Marcus said. Army, 2 tours. After that, he did ER support at Northwestern for 3 years before he took the Hartwell job. He specifically asked for regular hours, no nights, no on-call because of his daughter. Renata looked at the file. At the photograph on the intake form, Joel a few years younger, unguarded in the way people looked before they expected anything bad. I fired him in front of 30 executives to make a point about accountability. That wasn't accountability, that was performance. Marcus was quiet for a moment. It's a meaningful distinction. How do I fix it? I'm not sure you can fix it completely, but you can start by being straight with him. She reached out that afternoon, not through HR, not through an intermediary. She called the number in his file directly. He picked up on the 4th ring, the sound of a child's TV show in the background. It's Renata Voss, she said. I'd like to talk to you in person, not about a job, about something else. Is that something you'd be willing to do? A long pause. The TV volume dropped. What kind of something else? I had a conversation last night that I want to finish, a real one. Another pause. There's a coffee place on Addison, open Sundays. I'll be there at 10. The coffee place on Addison turned out to be a small, slightly worn neighborhood spot that had clearly been there since before everything in the neighborhood got expensive. Joel was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with a mug in front of him. He looked better than he had in the hospital. The swelling in his jaw had gone down, though the bruise had darkened, and he'd clearly decided to be cautious, not hostile. She ordered a coffee and sat down. How's your daughter? He asked first. Sleeping a lot. The doctors say that's normal after something like this. She's not having nightmares yet, but they said those might come. She wrapped her hands around her mug. How are your ribs? 2 more weeks before I can lift anything. A corner of his mouth moved. Ruby's been very solemn about reminding me. Renata smiled before she could stop herself. Then, I want to say something, and I need you to just let me say it. He nodded. I have spent the last 4 years building something I'm genuinely proud of, and somewhere in the middle of that, I started confusing being hard with being right. They're not the same thing. Being hard just means you don't flinch. Being right means you took the time to understand what you were looking at. She looked at him. Yesterday morning, I didn't understand what I was looking at. I saw a man who was late. I didn't see a father who'd been on the phone about his sick kid, who'd gotten on a train as fast as he could, who showed up anyway, even knowing it was going to go badly. I didn't bother to look. Joel didn't say anything. He just listened. You asked me in the car if it would have mattered. I've been thinking about that all night. She paused. I want to say yes, but the honest answer is I'm not sure. And that's the thing I have to change. What kind of change? He asked, not skeptically, just carefully. I talked to my team this morning about how we handle situations like this, whether it's someone late because of a family emergency or someone struggling with something they're not telling us about. I've been running this division like everyone is a variable to be optimized. I forgot that variables have kids and sick parents and broken water mains. She set her mug down. I don't expect you to care about any of that. I just needed to say it to someone who would tell me if I was wrong. Joel was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a bus went past, rattling the window slightly. You're not wrong, he said, but you're going to have to prove it to people who aren't me. I already know you can feel bad about something. That part's easy. The part that matters is what you do at 9 in the morning when the next person walks in late and you've got 30 people watching. I know. That's the version of you that needs to change. She nodded. I know. They sat with that for a moment. 2 people at a corner table, November light coming through the window, the sound of someone ordering a pastry at the counter. Can I ask you something? Renata said. You've been asking me things last night at the hospital. When Lily told me about the jokes, she said you told her your daughter pretends not to think they're funny. The corner of his mouth moved again. Ruby's been workshopping her eye roll since she was 6. She's very committed to not encouraging me. She sounds like Lily. Lily sounds like a pain in the ass. That's a compliment. Renata laughed. It surprised her. The genuine ease of it, the way it came out before she thought to manage it. She is, actually. They talked for another 30 minutes, not about anything important. About the neighborhood, about a school fundraiser Ruby was apparently forcing Joel to participate in, about the way Chicago winters came in like they wanted to settle a personal grudge. Small things. But under them was something real building slowly, the way foundations built, without ceremony, one layer at a time. When they stood to leave, Joel said, for what it's worth, you said the thing nobody ever says in person. Most people send an email or have HR do it. I figured I owed you the face-to-face. You did. He pulled on his jacket carefully, favoring his left side. The job thing, I meant what I said. I'm not coming back as your guilt project. But if you ever actually have an opening that makes sense on its own terms, you could reach out. I'm not closing the door. That's fair. They walked out into the cold together. He turned left. She turned right. And that was that for a while. 3 weeks passed. Renata stood in front of her full staff on a Thursday morning. All 92 people packed into the main floor and said the things she'd been rehearsing for days and then decided to stop rehearsing because it needed to sound like the truth, not a prepared speech. I made a mistake last month, she said. I fired someone in front of a room full of people without asking why he was late. The reason he was late was that his daughter was sick and he was trying to figure out how serious it was. I didn't ask. I didn't give him the chance. And I want you all to know that, not as a PR moment, not as a crisis communication, but because if I expect you to be accountable to me, I need to be accountable to you. That's how this works. The room was very quiet. I'm not perfect, she continued. I've been running this division like precision is the highest value. It's not. People are the highest value. Precision is a tool. It's not the point. She looked around the room. At Sandra, who'd been with her since the beginning and looked like she might be about to cry. At Kevin, who was nodding. At Marcus in the back, with his arms crossed and something on his face that looked like relief. If any of you have ever felt like you couldn't bring me a problem, like you had to hide something about your life to stay on my good side, I'm telling you right now that that stops. I need you to be whole people, not performance units. Whole people. Nobody applauded, nobody needed to, but something in the room shifted, a weightlifting, a tightness that had been so long-standing most of them had stopped noticing it. Renata went back to her office and sat with the quiet. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. My daughter told me your daughter wrote her a letter. Lily found my home address through the school directory. Thought you should know before you think I'm stalking your kid. Renata stared at it. She called Kevin in. Did Lily ask you for a home address? Kevin looked confused. No, but she might have gotten it from the hospital visitor log. She asked the nurse for the name of the man who stayed with her. Renata looked at her phone. Is that okay? She typed back. 3 dots appeared. Then, Ruby's been carrying it around for a week. She slept with it the first night. Renata didn't know what to do with the feeling that put in her chest. She sat there for a minute, then typed, Lily drew her a picture. She wants to know if she can mail it. The response came quickly. Ruby would like that. She said to tell Lily she's sorry she doesn't have a cat for her to draw back, but she can draw the basketball in the yard. Renata smiled at her phone like an idiot. Then she put it away and got back to work. The letters went back and forth. Lily's handwriting was oversized and enthusiastic, full of stickers. Ruby's was careful and precise, like someone who took the task seriously. They wrote about school, about their favorite movies, about a disagreement Ruby was having with her best friend, and whether Lily thought she was right. Lily did. Renata read them over Lily's shoulder sometimes, and every now and then Joel would text a line from one. Ruby told her she doesn't have to be fearless to be brave, just has to be scared and do it anyway. Where did she get that? And Renata would respond, from you probably, and the conversation would go quiet for a while in the comfortable way. In December, Joel called her, not a text, an actual call. Ruby wants to invite Lily to her school's winter concert, he said. It's next Thursday. I told her I'd ask. If it's too much or too soon, we can. We'll be there, Renata said. The concert was held in a school gymnasium that smelled like industrial cleaner and pine garland and had been decorated by people who loved it more than they had budget for. The children sang 3 songs in a row about snow, one of which appeared to be entirely improvised by a boy in the front row who had clearly forgotten the words. Ruby and Lily sat together in the row behind the performing students, heads bent close, whispering about something that made them both press their hands over their mouths to keep from laughing. Renata sat beside Joel in the folding chairs. Their shoulders were about 6 inches apart. At some point during the second song, that distance closed without either of them deciding it should. This is terrible, he said quietly. It's wonderful, she said, objectively. Terrible. Joel, thank you for calling. He looked at her sideways. Ruby made me. She has strong feelings about follow-through. She sounds exhausting. She's perfect, he said. She's an absolute nightmare. She's perfect. Renata looked at the stage where a girl in the back row was singing with her whole soul and her eyes closed like she was performing at Carnegie Hall. That's her, she said. That's her. They watched their daughters in the decorated gymnasium on a Thursday night in December, while the children sang about snow and a boy in the front row invented his own lyrics, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and neither of them said anything important at all. They didn't need to. March came. It always did eventually, with a particular stubbornness that felt personal in Chicago. 2 steps into spring, 3 steps back into cold, until one day you woke up and the air smelled different, and you knew something had changed for real. Renata had changed some things at Hartwell that felt real. The team brought her problems now, real ones, not just the curated version. Sandra had come to her last month about a contract clause she thought was unethical, and instead of shutting her down, Renata had pulled the clause. Marcus had started saying what he actually thought in meetings. Kevin had once carefully told her she was wrong about something, and she'd said thank you and meant it. She wasn't a different person. She was more of the one she'd been trying to be all along. Joel had taken a consulting role with a nonprofit focused on emergency preparedness training for schools. The hours were flexible, the pay was modest, and it used every skill he had. He'd called her the day he accepted the offer, not to ask her opinion, but because he wanted to tell someone who'd understand why it mattered. She understood. Lily's been asking about Ruby, Renata said one evening. They were at the coffee place on Addison again. It had become a thing, Sunday mornings, semi-regular, neither of them having formally acknowledged that it was a thing. Ruby's been asking about Lily. What does she ask? Whether she laughs at the jokes as yet. Does she? She's starting to, he said. She's polite about it, like she's doing a favor. That's exactly what Lily does with my jokes. Your jokes are terrible, I've been told. He looked at her across the table, that same steady, unhurried look. How are you? It was a simple question, and he asked it simply, and that was somehow the thing she wasn't prepared for. She thought for a moment. I'm better, she said. I'm figuring out what I'm building and why I'm building it. That's different than it was 6 months ago. Different how? 6 months ago, I was building to prove something. Now I think I'm building because I actually care about it. That's a different engine. It runs differently. He nodded. How are you? She asked. Ruby drew me a picture for my birthday, a portrait. I have a very large nose in it. From the perspective of a 9-year-old looking up, that tracks. He laughed, quick, genuine, the kind that made the corner of his eyes crease. She'd learned that laugh over the last few months. She was starting to understand the shape of him, the parts that were wary and the parts that were warmer than he let on, the way he talked about Ruby like she was both his greatest achievement and his most formidable opponent. "I want to say something," he said. "Okay, you did a hard thing. Standing in front of your whole staff and saying you were wrong. Most people don't do that. Most people figure out how to frame it so it sounds like they were mostly right. I was wrong. I know. I'm saying you said it anyway." He looked at his mug. "That's not nothing." Renata was quiet for a moment. "You did a hard thing too, letting people in after deciding not to. That's not nothing either." He met her eyes, continuing to work on it. "Me too." Outside, the March light was doing that thing it did in Chicago before real spring, thin and bright and full of intention. People were walking past in too light jackets, optimistic, probably about to regret it. Renata thought about the boardroom in November, about the moment she'd looked at a man and decided in a single second that she knew everything she needed to know about him, about how thoroughly wrong she'd been. Not just about why he was late, but about all of it. About the kind of person he was, about what he was carrying, about what it meant to show up for something even when it was already going badly. She thought about Lily, at the hospital, telling her about the knock-knock jokes. She thought about Ruby's careful handwriting on notebook paper, sent across the city to a girl she'd met once in a park. Some things you couldn't plan for. Some things you couldn't engineer or optimize or schedule into a quarter. Some things just arrived, knocked sideways, and then stayed. "Same time next Sunday?" Joel said. "Same time," she said. They walked out into the thin March light together. He turned up his collar against the wind. She did the same, and they walked in the same direction.